Chris Schmidt with you on the Average Joe Sports Show. Big moment early in the year for Nebraska against Colorado.
I'm Gary Sharp. We'll break down the matchup. There is a significant area where Nebraska has a huge advantage.
Hi, everybody. It's Bill Doleman, and we'll take a look back at some memorable games in the Nebraska-Colorado supposed rivalry and the greatness of Randy Essington.
It's Elijah Herbel here. We'll lock in our predictions at the end of this show. Keep it tuned in. It's the Average Joe Sports Show.
Welcome to it. The Average Joe Sports Show is back, episode 51. Find and like on YouTube, The Average Joe Sports Show, the AJ Sports Pod on Twitter, Spotify, and iTunes. We thought about going in the buff, but we decided not to. We all have shirts on. Some of us are wearing hats. Fellas, fare thee well, perhaps to Nebraska-Colorado. We'll hit some memories. We'll talk magnitude, moment, matchup, all that. Fellas, good to see you. Sharpie, BD, and Mr. Elijah Herbel. Chris Schmidt, as Colorado week continues on, Sharpie.
Yes. It's kind of, Elijah and I were talking before we started the show. It is kind of, first of all, I think when Nebraska plays like that, I like that better because a lot of people were happy Sunday. Wherever I went, people were happy. Yes. Like even my barista, who sometimes is a curmudgeon, they were happy. I like that. But it was like we didn't know what to do with Saturday. Well, Nebraska hasn't had a game where they played 107 guys and the game was over at halftime. And then you quickly transition into, oh, by the way, it's now Colorado week. I think, though, the Colorado, and maybe it's because as we tape this, we're a couple of days out, I still feel like it has not reached its peak. Maybe in the stadium is when this week will reach its peak instead of prior.
It's whenever those Husker fans have some interactions with some Buff fans outside Memorial Stadium. And I hope those are nice interactions. I hope they're fine. But, like, you could feel it walking around the stadium outside Folsom last year, that venom reached a new level at that point. Like, even from our pregame show to walking around the stadium, Buff fans and Husker fans, they just don't like each other. It's as simple as that. They're cats and dogs. They'll never get along. And,
yeah, but
out whenever you get some of those interactions outside the stadium, whenever Husker fan sees the first Buff fan of the day, that intensity is gonna step up a little bit.
Yeah, but when it's out at Folsom Field, it's almost 50-50. Colorado fans and Nebraska fans, if not more Nebraska fans at times. But when it's at Memorial Stadium, I mean, that's 90-10 at best, for Colorado. It might be more than 90% Nebraska fans. So the sheer numbers would indicate that there's probably not going to be many contentious interactions in Lincoln as there would be in Boulder, just because there's so many more Nebraska fans out there. Now, I know that, Chris, you have been a part of some interactions out there in Boulder where they've not made you feel welcome.
No, the interactions outside of Memorial Stadium or outside of Folsom tend to go like this. Nebraska winning by a lot, historically speaking. Nebraska hanging on in the fourth quarter to win by a little. And Buff fan either outside Memorial Stadium or outside Folsom screaming, bleep you, Nebraska sucks, and getting in somebody's face, but not willing to throw down. That's the interaction. So the numbers, yes, it'll be, you're right on 90-10, red versus black and gold. But the percentages are great. It's like Pete Rose on a 2-2 count. You're going to have some trust fund a-hole shoot his mouth off and try and start something. They'll either be dosed up or licked up, but they aren't going to be pleasant. That's how it goes after Buff fan would get their heart broken either in Lincoln or in Colorado. It's been a while since we can point to a specific moment because Nebraska's on a 3-game losing streak.
Don't you think Saturday night is therapy for the Husker fan?
Oh, brother, it is therapy. It's marriage counseling. It's winning and it's stopping child support and alimony. Throw everything into the mix of freedom.
I can't wait for it to get here now.
Well, boy, what happens if you don't win on Saturday night? According to Schmidt, the world ends. You're done. Just cash it in.
Well, let's use a better analogy.
It's gonna feel like that. It's gonna feel like that if they don't win.
A better analogy though, Schmidt. That was harsh. How about winning custody of your kids in court? Maybe that's what it is. Is that instead of losing child support?
Depends on your kid. All right. I love him, but I don't want to work 2 or 3 more jobs.
Look, last week when Nebraska wins, and I did not have a chance to listen to the myriad of post-game reaction shows, which you are all a part of. I got to listen to about 10 minutes as I walked across campus, and most of the reaction of Husker fans after last Saturday's game was, let's go to Jerry in North Bend. I got nothing. Go Big Red. And nobody had it. They just there was like a conditioning that they had to call into a post-game reaction show, but there was really no reaction because Nebraska won. They weren't used to it, and they just were all kind of happy and ready to go. Now, if there's a loss on Saturday, well, that means that those shows will be a little more hyperbolic. But last Saturday's game was therapeutic for Nebraska fans to get the season underway, which we talked about on our last show, which in my mind began the day that the rumors about Dylan Raiola coming to Nebraska began. So last week's game was a culmination of that long wait. And it was a great performance, a great start to the season. And now it's on to the game that you've been waiting for a year, the rematch with Colorado, and I guess the renewal of the rivalry. But look, Nebraska fans are excited. It'll be an incredible atmosphere, and I can't wait for kickoff.
I think it's a must-win game.
It is. From a health and mental wellness standpoint, not just for the fan base, but Sharpie, this team's been trying to get over the hump against a name, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I heard your conversation with Matt Schick, and he's right. Colorado is relevant. They're the only team in college football that is relevant without winning. So they're relevant. And if Nebraska is going to go to where they think they're going to go, first of all, they got to start winning home games. They also have to continue to win games that they're favored. And if you consider this a coin flip game, a one-possession game, then if you're making strides, you start to stack these kind of games. And it also is, it's another opportunity for Nebraska on a stage where this game will draw some big ratings. I mean, Dion is drawing a lot of people in, but there's also the Nebraska factor. It's NBC. It's in a good time slot. So you're going to have a lot of people watching. And remember, there's a lot of national people that are all in on Nebraska. Well, if that's the case and you're moving forward, which I all think, we all are under the impression and our observation is, yeah, it's different, then you find any way to win a football game like Saturday night, and by Sunday you move on and you're 2-0. And you know what, guys? You might wake up Monday morning and you're ranked for the first time in 8 years.
They were ranked in front of 19's 20-point debacle where they were up in Boulder. But yes, I mean, it's been 16 since they stayed in the polls, and entered in, because they're hovering right around where Memphis is at right now, probably in that low 31, 32, 33 number. But the whole offseason theme has been chasing 3. And I think from a therapeutic standpoint for this team, first and foremost, it would be poetic for them to have to play a 4-quarter game against a named team. And then as you get down to crunch time, that 5-minute mark in the 4th quarter, to get a stop defensively. And the defense did everything but get that one stop in all those 1-score games. There was one breakdown. A lot of times it was a 2-minute drill, a kick. I look at Maryland's drive, right? I mean, it was 13-10 all over again every game in November, it felt like, or overtime against Wisconsin. You get that stop defensively when it's under 7 minutes, under 6 minutes in the 4th quarter. You get the ball back in a tight ball game, and Dylan comes in, drives the field, you either win it with a kick or you get in for the touchdown and the cover if you can get in at 6.5. And all is good because it works to that chasing 3, that one-score game element. And from a confidence standpoint, you finally did it. And you did it against a team of substance with hype, with NFL guys on it. And you did it on a national stage. That would be poetic for this football team. Now, if they win by 38, that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not going to complain, and I'm not putting my big red Husker glasses on that got checked at the door about 24-ish years ago. But just looking at the whole health of it, man, this rivalry, this series, I know Oklahoma, Nebraska gets the feels going, and there's the nostalgia, but this is right there for me too. We all have a favorite memory. We'll probably roundtable.
Okay, I'm gonna be old guy here. Okay,
fine.
Look,
kick her ass. Is that the old guy?
Look, I mean, okay, it's a rivalry, but the way it gets built up, these last 3 or 4 or 5 meetings is like, folks have been gathered around the campfire, and then around the Victrola, and then around the stereo console, and gathering, every Thanksgiving to watch Nebraska and Colorado, exchange wins back and back year after year. And look, I get that there's been contention since the mid 1980s when Colorado finally won, but even during the McCartney, Neuheisel, Barnett era, Nebraska's about 21-4. During that 25. And I remember, there was a guy who used to coach in Nebraska who used to say, well, I thought a rivalry was when, both teams won a few times. But look, if I go back into my Husker history about famous Colorado players, and I've tried to do this for the past years, really. But the only Colorado player of significance that I can remember pre-1989 is Randy Essington. Okay? So when I look now after, Darian Hagan got recruited, and then there's Rashawn Salam, and there's I've already run out. Charles Johnson and Michael Westbrook, and they had some great defensive play. I get that. Once they finally broke through and had that win, what was it, 1989, about McCartney's 6th or 7th season there, after declaring Nebraska a rival, when Nebraska is like, what happened? Don't we go to your place and spend a lot of money throughout the course of the year, and now you hate us? What? And so, look, if I were to go back into great Colorado-Nebraska games of yesteryear, I can't really go back much further than 1989 or so.
You're missing one of the biggest names in Buff history, though. Well, not Buff history, Husker history. Charlie McBride, notable former Buffalo.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. I guess Charlie and I could talk about great Colorado-Nebraska games of the 1960s when he was punting for the Buffs in 62.
Orange Bowl team. Yeah, it's been one-sided, but they've been, aside from 95 and 05 and 01, they've been dogfights. They've been escapes with their life.
I get that, and I respect that. I respect that there have been some battles over the last 15 years or whatever they've met, where there have been some back-and-forth battles, and you win 3 and they win 3. Okay, so it has developed. It has the markings of a recent generational rivalry. But to talk about Nebraska and Colorado as a part of college football lore, dating back to the Four Horsemen or the great Army teams or the great Minnesota teams of the 30s and 40s, that's not there. It is a recent phenomena that Bill McCartney decided he needed to do something to gin up support and interest in his football program. And he did it. Congratulations, you have done it. But to think that this is something that goes back into the anthologies of college football, it's not there. It's a recent thing, and people can hype it up, and they will on Saturday, and then it'll be forgotten after this year. I don't know when they're scheduled to meet again. and people will forget that.
No, this is it. That's why people, Colorado's won the last 3, but this is the last one. And it could be the last one for a long, long time in the regular season.
Right.
So this is the one you will remember. I actually say thank you to Bill McCartney in Colorado, because when Oklahoma was starting to fall off the radar and they had all kinds of issues and Switzer was out and Gibbs came in and then to Schnellenberger, the Nebraska-Oklahoma wasn't there anymore. They went through that stretch of about 10 years where Oklahoma wasn't where Nebraska was, and in comes Colorado. And Colorado had some dudes and they had some teams. And they actually, I think, helped Nebraska remain at a high level, because Nebraska still had that one team in the old Big 8 that you couldn't just run roughshod over everybody. That Colorado game became a big game because they were the closest to you in terms of talent on the field. So I say thank you to Colorado. And we kind of got spoiled in that stretch where there were a 9-year stretch where 6 of those years, Nebraska and Colorado were both ranked in the top 10. And you had some iconic moments and iconic photos from those games, whether it be in 90, 91 with a snowball, an extra point, Chad Brown running it back, or a field goal that's blocked and Chad Brown running it back, 92 with the black shirts crushing Detmer, 93, 94, the great matchup of 2 versus 3, where Eric Alford scores a touchdown and his arms are in the air, and the old scoreboard in the South Stadium that had Nebraska on the speakers was centered. Then you have 95, you have Dylan Raiola's dad, who told all the student section to come down and suck after they beat him in overtime in 99. I mean, so there was the stretch where it was a lot of fun, but we also have to acknowledge that Colorado killed the aura of Nebraska on Black Friday in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a program-breaking moment. And it had been a situation where you'd escaped in 2000, Crouch's drive to Newcomb and Josh's kick on what ended up being Dom's last game as a Husker before he went in early to the NFL draft. 99, Aldridge shanks a game-winning field goal in regulation. Crouch sneaks in 99 to get in, but it dented him in the polls and kept him out of playing for a national championship. It was Virginia Tech and Florida State. 98, you still beat him without scoring an offensive touchdown. And then 97, I'm sitting in the end zone, the Colorado end zone that has the big Colorado kind of ramp, and 3 farmers from western Nebraska are sitting with me. They bring their suitcases of Busch Light in because we drank them out of Coors, apparently, somehow. And some Buff fan starts picking a fight with 3 guys with beards. They all look like Rip from Yellowstone, from Nebraska. And the CU security let it happen. So 3 Rips torched some poor soul from Colorado that wanted to start a fight about halftime. And it happened, and it was pretty glorious to just watch it all go down. 96 was the freshman year game, man, where it was ice and snow and black ice, and it was the fumble game, and that was Neuheisel's last inherited great team. That was a top 5 ball game, and 95 they go out there in front of Kenny Rogers and God and destroy Colorado. I'm on that first play of the game, so it's nostalgia for me. It's my favorite. As much as I love Oklahoma, Nebraska, Colorado turned out to be it for me. And I'll never forget my college radio debut was calling Nebraska-Colorado in 2000. My dad drops me off.
Josh
my
Brown.
dad drops me off. Says, go get him. And I go get to do play-by-play for the game. Well, next to me in the booth was the Colorado families. And that's the game where the Buffs get a 2-point conversion to go up. And everyone's going nuts to my right. It's all Buff. It's Gary Barnett's wife. It's family. And then Crouch drives him down the field to Newcomb. Josh hits the kick. And then you turn and look as you're doing the sign-off. Everyone's got mascara running because they're crying. And then Barnett rips his headset in half and just goes Bo Jackson with it on the sideline. And so it's it's full of memories, man. I just went Rolodex on you, but it's cool. I love this ball game, and I want it every year. I'm going to miss after Saturday.
It's funny because after that 2000 game, Schmidt walked down to the field. I've heard this on good authority and says, "Hey, sorry about your headset. I got a great weekly radio spot for you coming up here in about 15 years if you're interested."
Only interview he did in 05 was with me, which I'm going to humble brag for 2 seconds on that because he was under siege in 05. They got worked out by the Restore the Order team, Bill, the 4-year craze of the flu, you remember. And then they got hammered by Texas, and it was done. But he's been a good dude to me for a long time.
So there's also 2 other moments that stand out to me about this rivalry, and both happened in Boulder. When I was on the radio crew, on the road, I would do the post-game interview with Coach Solich.
Okay.
You guys have no idea, and all of you have been successful in your broadcasting career. You guys have no idea how difficult it is to interview the head football coach at the University of Nebraska after your team had gotten beat 62-36.
Oh.
And you have to do the locker room show and the head coach. And in Boulder, the locker room is small. So you aren't standing outside because of the fans, they'd be getting on you. So you are inside of the locker room, and it's pure silence. And so I had to ask guys who had a deer in the headlight look, what happened? Fast forward 2 years later, guys, the game ends, Nebraska wins, the players are celebrating. Frank Solich is in near tears. We're walking up the walkway towards the Nebraska locker room. There is Steve Peterson, the athletic director. Every single player and every single staff member walked right by him.
Oh.
They were getting ready to shut the door. I was a little bit behind. A member of the training staff for Nebraska said, "Sharpie, get in here." I got in there. They shut the door. I'm not going to share here because that's left best for all of those players and everybody who was there. It's one of the most passionate speeches about Nebraska football and what it means to play Nebraska football that I've ever heard anybody say, and that's what Frank said after they beat Colorado. And you guys know what happened. And I'm interviewing him on the postgame, and he is giddy as can be, and you guys know what happened the following day. He got fired.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and then fast forward to most recently, look at how we've looked at Colorado is the game that Nebraska's going to be back. It was quirky in 18 because the opener got postponed. Adrian Martinez throws this deep ball to Spielman at the beginning of the game against CU in 18, and we're like, Nebraska's got a quarterback. We're back, baby. Scott Frost, how do I get to my knees soon enough? And then you know what happened. Go to the following year, which is kind of similar, but this team is more mature and can handle what's at stake. In 2019, in that offseason, Nebraska built up to that's our game. There's going to be a takeover of the stadium. That's essentially going to be our home game. It's Colorado. It has been a rival. That's the game that we show people that Nebraska is back. Yeah, we got to play week 1. They go out there. They got off to that great start, remember? The stadium is packed in red. They throw a little out pass to Mo Washington, and down the field he goes, and you're like, this is what Nebraska football is supposed to be. And then reality kicked in and reminded us this is what Nebraska football has been and is that second half where you had total discombobulation between the sidelines and the booth when it came to Frost and Walters trying to determine what they were going to run. Nebraska was never the same. They never recovered. The rest is history down the road. Look at this year. We talk about, okay, Nebraska is using game 2, huge stage. It's Colorado. There's vigor in the crowd. This is the game you win to go, all right, things are different.
And Gary, you called it at the beginning of the show a must-win game. Want to get your thoughts. What's the implication if Nebraska doesn't get it done? Because I'm with you. The implication is from the outside perspective, what the national media are going to say. If Nebraska gets this done, and if Nebraska gets this done convincingly, solidly, it's going to be that conversation of, man, Nebraska could be pretty good this year. This could be the Nebraska we've been waiting for to be back on the national scene. What does it mean to you if Nebraska doesn't get it done on Saturday? What's the implication?
I think, Elijah, and I don't know how you guys feel, I think the team would move on quickly I think the fans would have a tough time.
That's the split.
Yep.
It's absolutely the split. There's bigger names, more weight on the schedule, Bill. But if we want to talk momentum, and to your point, Sharpie, about being back or a signal of it's different, it's better, it's okay to believe or buy in as a fan. Yeah, you got to get Saturday done. But there are more opportunities this season. Rutgers looms, and I know they're pretty good. You've got Ohio State. We know what November looks like, but get it handled at home as a favorite and do everybody a solid. Do yourself a solid as a team, as Giff was talking about, the enemy within, right? I mean, that's a big part of this, is the psyche and just handling that moment. Bill, I'm interested to get your take on not only, what's next if it doesn't happen Saturday, but give us a little more in-depth too on TO, beyond the, you got to beat us once in a while to be a rival. I mean, there's some moments, dude, as long as you've been with Nebraska, the 7,000 below zero game where you're dodging snowballs. I mean, you've got a lot of history with this as well.
I'd like to talk more about the greatness of Randy Essington. Look, the one thing about, I think for Tom and what, that's the lens I probably look at this rivalry, it's just another game, and you have to coach it that way. Now, whether 96,000 people on Saturday are going to buy into that, no. The other 96,000 plus that are marching around Memorial Stadium wishing they could get in, no. But Tom's demeanor and the way he approached every game. Now, Oklahoma back in the day, that was always I think on his mind, that it was coming. But you can't get there unless you go through what you have in front of you. So I don't think Nebraska can look at this game as the most important. We can, but I think this is why the schedule sets up so well for Nebraska this year. Because if they win the game on Saturday, then you're looking at probably a pretty good hangover. Now, God bless Northern Iowa, fine institution that it is, but that's a game Nebraska should win, even with the hangover. And then you get it right, you feel good, and then you go into the Big Ten slate Friday night against Illinois. If things don't go well on Saturday, you've got an opportunity to refocus yourself pretty quick, probably have a Sunday after practice on Sunday after the game, like you did last year after Michigan, and you refocus for Northern Iowa, and you get things right as you head into Big Ten play. So the schedule is very good for Nebraska, but the TO approach, is absolutely the best way to go about this. You cannot be too high going in. You cannot be too low going in. And you've got to understand that before you enter the stadium on the tunnel or for the tunnel walk, because that crowd is going to be jacked. And, I can think of some great games in the past where and you guys can too, Miami and Oregon, and you go back, pre-2000 and games when Colorado did come, or Oklahoma. It's going to be incredibly energetic. But if those players enter the stadium on an even keel and let the momentum and the excitement come to them instead of tiring yourself out so much beforehand, it could get away from you. So I buy into the TO approach that it's a big game, but it's just one game, especially this early in the season.
Can Colorado win this game, guys, without Nebraska giving it to them? If you really want to be taken aback, go back and look at the first half drive chart for Nebraska last year against Colorado. It's full of fumbles, interceptions, missed field goals, and punts. And how does Colorado win this game if Nebraska doesn't give it to them?
To me,
that's part of it.
It's giving Shadur Sanders time and finding matchups that you like with your wide receivers on Nebraska's defensive backs. That's how I see them getting it done. But it's an uphill battle. Like, I think that would even have to be likely accentuated by the fact that Nebraska turned the ball over once or twice, or absolute blown coverage. Nebraska defenders are looking at each other with their hands up, and there's Travis Hunter going 70 yards for 6. Like, it's things that I wouldn't necessarily call Nebraska gifting the game, because last year Nebraska gifted the game, at least the competitive of that game, pretty early. There's things that Colorado can do football-wise that worry me, but they worry me more if there's the one or two things we've come to expect from Nebraska. A fumble here, an interception here, blown coverage here, whatever it may be.
I don't think what Colorado is good at is sustainable. Are they going to hit a big play or two or five? Yeah. Do they score on all of them? Are they forced to settle for three? Are they one-dimensional? Do they get any semblance of a run game? Now, the 8-yard pass turns into a 7 that the Travis Hunter or Horn play that we all remember multiple times against North Dakota State. Colorado can do that to anybody. All right. But the flip side of it is Nebraska will have to be changing their shot, to quote Matt Rule, in this game, i.e., not go about what's gotten them success, at least in week one. They're going to have to turn it over. And what was messed up last year were the way the turnovers happened. It wasn't a tipped ball, or it wasn't a play a guy made to strip a ball or jump a route. It was just flat out not holding onto the football on a center snap, on a shotgun snap. And your defense was so brained because of the first half they played, keeping that thing at 13-0 at halftime. There was no hope for them. They couldn't go out there and play offense. They should have tried, because it would have been better off. So, yeah, Nebraska is going to have to get out of their own way this one. And if they don't, if they're turnover prone, if they're sloppy, if they're uncertain of themselves, that's the help that Colorado needs to get out of Lincoln with a win.
Would Colorado have won last year if Nebraska had not just left the ball on the carpet? I think so. That was the game last year where I think even though they scored 36 points last year, the final score not indicative, other than Nebraska gave it away. I don't know if they win that game. Maybe they do, but certainly not as handily as they did, because I think there was the dropping of the football and the myriad of problems Nebraska had led to a letdown in the second half. Mm-hmm. And then it just kind of got away. But I think that was the game where we watched in that first half and most of the second half too, thinking this Nebraska defense might be really pretty good. Yeah. You know, even though they got 36 points on them, there were things that defense did last year against CU that were good enough to win the game if the offense just hadn't decided, well, we don't need this football thing, do we? So would Nebraska have gotten beat last year without all that? I don't know. I think the defense was good enough to win. And I think we started to realize that as the season went on.
I think so. I think Colorado still wins that football game because the Colorado offense is built in a way that eventually, at some point, they're going to have a play that breaks big for them. I think it's going to happen Saturday. At some point on Saturday, Colorado's going to hit at least one play that breaks big for them. That's how their offense is designed. At some point in time, they're going to come up against a coverage that they have an advantage against. They have an elite-level quarterback in Shedeur Sanders that can deliver the ball on time, on target, and they have weapons at wide receiver that, with the ball in their hand, can turn 10 yards into 60. They can turn, 60 into 60. Like, they're just that good. And I also look at it as being, last year, the Colorado defensive performance was like the perfect, when Matt Rule said this offseason, like, if you stack guys in the box and leave yourself exposed on the back end, we're going to absolutely murder you. I'm paraphrasing for him, but that was essentially the heart of the quote. The Colorado game last year was the definition of a team that was stacking the box, stopping Nebraska's rushing attack, and Nebraska couldn't take advantage over the top. They didn't have a quarterback that could deliver the ball or even hang on to the ball, and they didn't have wide receivers that could get enough separation against those Colorado defensive backs. I think as that game wore on last year, I'm with you. If Nebraska doesn't turn the football over, it's probably a lot closer. I still think Colorado probably comes out victorious in that game because of matchups. Stylistically, they matched up really, really well against a Nebraska team last year that was pretty unsure of itself. I look at this year, I don't want to say a similar story, but I do think Colorado is going to have some plays that break big for them. That's how their offense is designed. That's what they want. The key for them, I think, is going to be their ability to stop the run. Can they stop the run without stacking the box? I think Nebraska does have a guy in Raiola that no matter how experienced Colorado's defensive coordinator Livingston is with his NFL defensive back passing game coordinator type history. No matter how experienced he is at concealing coverages, giving you different coverage shells, trying to confuse Dylan Raiola pre-snap, at some point, if you're stacking the box, Raiola is also going to be able to take advantage of it. If they're able to stack the box, or if they're able to stop the run without stacking the box, and you turn Nebraska's offense somewhat one-dimensional with a freshman quarterback, I like the senior quarterback outdoing a freshman quarterback, especially with those receivers Colorado has. That's how Colorado gets it done this year in my mind, is if their defensive line is able to go mano-a-mano with Nebraska's O-line, slow down the Nebraska rushing attack, force Dylan Raiola to be a playmaker with the ball in his hands, that's where the concern starts to leak in for me. So stylistically, I don't love the matchup for Nebraska, but that's a big what-if for Colorado, is being able to stop the run without bringing extra guys.
Well, I think, and I agree with a lot of what you said, Elijah, I think this is a prove-it game for the mentality of this football team that talks about being physical and being good in the trenches. Because this is one of, before I get to the trenches, can you guys recall a Nebraska football game of late where all the promotional material features two quarterbacks? Like the other team has a quarterback that's featured, and now Nebraska has a quarterback that's featured. It's been a long time. Maybe Zach Taylor against Joel Klatt. I mean, I'm just thinking of where, like, if you're doing a promotional poster like NBC, the two starting quarterbacks are on it. That's rare from Nebraska's perspective.
I think you go back to Montez and Adrian, but it doesn't happen.
But,
it hasn't happened.
But this is and there's Hunter and there's Horn and there's Lester and there's Shepard. I mean, there are skill guys that make you go, oh, okay. But guys, this is the game that's won in the trenches. What Elijah was talking about. I'm wearing my run the damn ball hat guy. I am that hat I am wearing because I think that's Nebraska's success. Look it, Nebraska ran the ball really well. I don't care who they were playing. They ran it well, and they ran it smartly. North Dakota State ran the ball. They had success. They were moving guys off the line, and that is not a great offensive line that North Dakota State has. I think Nebraska can run the ball and not get fancy. On the other side is where I think one of the biggest mismatches in this entire matchup is, and that is Nebraska's defensive line against Colorado's offensive line. I think Seaton, the freshman, is going to be a good player, but I looked at the four other guys against North Dakota State, and North Dakota State didn't bring a ton of pressure. They would bring four right at the snap. They would bring the safety down, but maybe a zone pressure. But most of the time, Sanders got outside of the pocket and became playground football. But you look at the other four offensive linemen, I think they really struggled with movement, and they got overpowered. I think Nebraska's defensive line will destroy Colorado's interior offensive line. And if they're able to do that and get to Shedeur, which they did last year, and they got him 7 times, then they had other opportunities to get him down. That's where this game is won. Under pressure, though, Sanders is pretty much money. He was 7 of 9 for 185 or 187 against North Dakota State, but he was pressured 30% of his dropbacks. You don't think a much better defensive line is going to be half of his dropbacks? He's going to be under pressure. That's where I think this game is won, is strictly in the trenches. And if you have preached to everybody that we've been physical and we're a physical team, what better opportunity than to show that against a team that also says they're physical, but doesn't necessarily show it all the time?
Here's the key guy. All right. Yeah, I would say it's Dylan Edwards, but he's not there anymore at the running back position for Colorado. Whoever the running back is for CU, the critical thing that he has to do is pick up a blitzing linebacker, rush in, whoever. He is going to be the bodyguard for Shedeur Sanders. The job for the Colorado running back is to pick up the blitz and the pressure. That's all. Maybe it's not Offerdahl. Maybe it's somebody else who's more of a fullback tight end type that can actually, handle the pressure. Because I agree with you, Gary. I think this is a pressure defense that Sanders did not face last week and may not have faced at all last year. And he got rocked a lot last year throughout the season. So whoever they have that can pick up that blitzer, that athletic guy who's going to be putting pressure on Sanders, That's the job of the running back for Colorado. And I would not be shocked if they throw it 50 plus, maybe 60 times on Saturday. They're not gonna run the ball. And they're going to be able to run the ball against Hutmaker and Robinson and Lenhart and company. Yeah. So it is going to be them wanting to throw, and they got to protect him. And somebody's got to help that offensive line.
Is this the Ty Robinson legacy game? I know him and Nash. Know. I mean.
Hey, well, remember, guys, Ty Robinson didn't play in the first half last year against Colorado.
Targeting. That's right.
Yeah, he had to sit out the first half against Colorado. So he's got to make up for lost time.
I think so.
Ty and Nash, in my opinion, what still worries me about Shedeur, even with pressure, is the escapability. If he gets outside the pocket and his receivers get a chance to do scramble drills, Shedeur is even more dangerous than he is inside the pocket. I do wonder if there's going to be any sort of, if you have the ability, if you can get home with 4 to do a quarterback spy. Defensive coordinators hate spying the quarterback. It's infuriating. You're essentially just playing 11 against 10 whenever you're doing that, in case there's a guy who escapes the pocket. Shedeur is good enough outside the pocket. You have to think about it. But I look at the two guys that really need to have huge games, to me, are Jamari Butler and a guy like James Williams. Or pick your guy to put in there, whether it's Prince Will, Linhart. Those guys on the outside, because you know Ty Robinson and Nash are going to get a push. If you can get that same pressure from the outside, there's nowhere for Shedeur to go. That's the thing. If you get the guys knifing in from the outside, forcing Shedeur to step up inside the pocket, that's where Ty and Nash do their best work. They're going to be cleaning things up. And also, even if they don't get home, much, much harder for a quarterback to deliver on the money under pressure like Shedeur does so well whenever you don't have a place that you can step forward into. Whenever you're throwing off the back foot, you don't have the same kind of velocity on your throws. That's where the Nebraska defensive back room gets a little bit scary, is if the pressure is getting home and Shedeur's throwing it off the back foot. Defensive backs love that. I look at those guys. You have to get pressure on the outside. Colorado's tackles are much improved. The interior offensive line, what I saw against North Dakota State, still left a lot to be desired. The tackles are improved. Seaton's one of them. The guy on the right, his name escapes me. I should know better than that by now. But if you can beat those guys on the edge, force Shedeur to step up into Nash and Ty, oh man, that Colorado offense is going to be in a world of hurt.
But are we worried though, guys? Because last year they picked on Hartzog.
Oh, they're going to do it again.
I think the thing about this game is, one, Nebraska's a good tackling team, and they're going to have to tackle in space. But they're also going to need a little bit of gang tackling. The one thing that you notice about Colorado, when Sanders gets outside of the pocket and becomes playground, his ability to keep plays alive, man, there's a lot of guys on that defense where this is, man, if you could rush 4 and drop 7 is an advantage, because those guys on defense for Nebraska, they're going to run for a while. And you see the big plays is when you run, and the play's still alive, and all of a sudden you let up, and Sanders zips it in there. I worry about them picking on Hartzog again, and also looking at a guy like Hartzog and Buford and saying, let's get them 15 yards down the field. I think they try and test those two guys early, and if it doesn't work, then that's an advantage for Nebraska. But I still have some hesitation about the back end, because you're playing a playground football team. So all of your technique and things you're used to kind of goes out the window. I mean, Nebraska on defense really has to be sound mentally, okay? They can't just all of a sudden freelance on their own, and that's when you're going to get picked apart. And you look at last year, that's where a couple of the Colorado big plays happened is Tommy Hill got lost. They exploited him. A couple of other big plays that Colorado had. Nebraska kind of lost their way on what was going on, and next thing you know, there's separation. Wide receiver's got the ball in his hands, and he's either on the goal line or he's in the red zone.
Here's a quick question. You had a lot of pressures, you had a lot of hits, you had a lot of hurries just last Thursday night. That's 1 week. That's week 1. I'm sure there's been a few ice baths. I'm sure that the massages have been happening back-to-back weeks. I mean, if they're going to throw it as much as we think, how many times does Nebraska remind them that they're there? We're talking hits, follow through, not just sacks, but can you bat him around to the point where he doesn't want anymore? And I'm not saying he's going to tap out and check out and quit, but if he's not getting protection and he's getting hit by a 285, 300-pound guy every single or every other pass play, how long can he last? I think that's a fair question.
Well, if his offensive line doesn't protect him, I think that there will be about 7 other people on the field that will protect him and not allow him to be hit the way he was a couple of times against North Dakota State. So I think Nebraska has to be pretty cognizant of getting there and taking a little extra step, because I think that there's probably some protection that he'll have. They'll be keeping a close eye on when he gets hit, how he gets hit, and you don't want those flags flying. Now, on the other side of the coin to that, I think the Colorado offensive line is probably going to – I wouldn't doubt if there's 3 or 4 procedure penalties because of the crowd, because I think that offensive line knows that it has to beat that defensive line by a half step, and they might be pretty quick on the draw and anticipating the snap, and it ain't going to be there. And the flags are going to fly. I think the crowd is worth 15 to 20 yards in procedure penalties, because that offensive line knows that Nebraska defense is coming, and they have got to be ready when the ball snapped. And I think they'll jump the gun.
I also wonder, I to jump in here, I also wonder, with the emotion of the crowd, look at what happened, and it was in North Dakota State. A lot of people from Bison Nation were in Boulder. Shiloh Sanders had a couple of late hits. There was a lot of emotion in that game. Who's going to be able to keep their emotions in check when they're trying to make a statement early on with a big hit? Or, hey, we're announcing our presence with authority. Is there going to be an early flag thrown? Or are they going to let them get physical? That's another part. Are they going to let guys fight at the line of scrimmage with wide receivers? Because I think we'll see a good amount of press coverage. Are they going to let guys just beat each other up off the line of scrimmage? Or, what kind of a handle they're going to have on this game? And then I'll go a step further, and I think it's an actual benefit for Nebraska. We all watched that game last Thursday night against North Dakota State. What did Travis Hunter have the propensity to do with the ball in the air?
Use his hands and get a little separation.
But it wasn't called. You don't think Nebraska before the game, when the official stops in to say, hey, coach, should there be anything we're looking for, trick play, anything like this out of the unusual? They don't say, hey, we just want you to call a fair game, have a good night, and, oh, by the way, watch 12 when the ball is in the air. And I think it's a Big Ten officiating crew.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
I was looking into that just now. I was trying to figure out what the officiating crew was going to be for this game, because it matters.
It matters big time. Nebraska's run game, we know that's huge. We highlighted the offensive line. Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt, Average Joe Sports Show, Spotify and iTunes. Like and subscribe. YouTube, just type in Hail Varsity. No, I type in Average Joe Sports Show. The AJ Sports Pod is where you follow us on Twitter. Forgive me, I will
we'll crowd promote. Gary's got a show on 1620. There you go. In the morning, 6 to 10.
We're even. What I was trying to spit out is the run game. What running back thrives? I know they're going to put all 4 in position to carry it, but who do you think emerges Saturday night carrying the football for Nebraska?
I think Dowdell is probably a motivated young man. And look, I said Nebraska would have a fumble, and it's not going to be because they just dropped the snap on the carpet like they did a year ago. Somebody's going to come in defensively and make a play, and that's what happened. They punched the ball loose. He fumbled. He went on the bench. He came back in. But I think in a game like this, I think he's probably somebody who may get the bulk of the carries. I still think Nebraska's running backs room, they'll do like they did on Saturday, where it's 8 to 12 apiece. But I think that given his size, that he's probably the one that is going to test that Colorado defensive line a little bit more with the hammer plays. Now, Gabe Ervin is certainly capable of doing that as well, given the fact he looks like a linebacker. But, Emmett and Ramir Johnson give a different look. But I think if you're looking at a game with the physicality up front, like Nebraska's going to want to play with ball control, I think Dowdell first, and then maybe Gabe Ervin gets a few more carries in this one as opposed to 6, maybe closer to 10.
Sure. Hammer it between the tackles.
Dowdell finally looks like what we thought Nebraska was getting. And you know what? I'm glad they pulled him after the fumble, now he eventually came in for one more series, but did not carry. But, there has to be consequences. And it wasn't like it was an egregious fumble, but still that matters. If you've been preaching that all offseason, but I think they have 4 running backs that give them different variety. I would rather have Ramir catching the ball than running the ball because I don't think as a running back his vision is very good. But you've got Emmett Johnson, who just seems to get better game by game. Dowdell is not afraid to run people over. And then they've found maybe a niche for Gabe Ervin. Is short yardage. He's a load. And I think he's also a guy that you don't want to overextend. Keep him fresh. I thought they did a really good job of rotating running backs. And for one of the rare times, guys, I thought the play calling matched the running back that was in the game.
Yes.
I had a lot of issues with that last year. I thought opening game this year, 4 running backs, all co-running number 1 guys, when they would call a play, it made sense for the type of running back that was in the game.
I mean, yeah, for Ervin, it's 22 personnel, I formation, we're running power. For Emmett Johnson, you saw more of the zone stuff out of shotgun. You saw some downhill power concepts coming for Dowdell. I hadn't thought of that, but that's a great point. One thing I do think is as we talk about the workload, I think coming into this game, 1A, Emmett Johnson, 1B, Dowdell. But I think it's a game that favors Dowdell because you don't need a home run hitter this game. You need a guy that can churn out 4 or 5 yards in a cloud of dust, to use the old football adage. Like, you want a guy that runs behind his pads, that the Colorado defense, as the game wears on, is less and less willing to tackle. That's not Emmett Johnson to me. That's Dante Dowdell to me. And Dowdell has a little bit of home run hitter in him, but that's not what you need this Saturday. What you need is a guy that can pick up the 4 or 5 difficult yards, make a Colorado defender feel you, and then line up and do it all again on second down. That's what Nebraska needs, and to me, that's Dowdell.
Do we have a big game from Fedoni? Do the tight ends tribute the 94 tribute? And
yeah, I do.
I wear them out with the tight ends?
I absolutely think that, but I don't think they throw the ball to him behind the line of scrimmage. I think that playbook, that page in the playbook has been torn out. But no,
state law.
I do. I think that this is a game that gives Dylan Raiola a little security. He knows he can stretch it. He's got Nayor. He's got Banks. He's got speed with Lloyd and whatnot. But I do think that if you're looking to make that second down and 5 throw, Lindenmeyer proved that he's pretty capable as well. So I do think that maybe the passing game shortens up a little bit more with a couple of long plays just to air it out and see what they can do. But I remember that game in '94, and Bill McCartney saying after the game that essentially, I'm poorly paraphrasing, Nebraska won the game because they those trick play passes to the tight end. They hadn't shown that reliance to Alford and God, who else was on that team in '94? Gilman. The tight ends. That was one of the great tight end games in Nebraska football history. And McCartney said it was we weren't ready for that. And 24-7 final score, but it was a pretty simple game plan. And I think that might be what you see on Saturday.
I like the Fedoni call because I do think you want to test the Colorado defensive backs, their ability and their willingness to tackle. I think Carter Nelson might have an expanded role, but for some reason, the name I'm coming back to, quiet last week, I don't know if that was intentional from Nebraska's staff, whether that was just UTEP not wanting to let Nebraska take the top off. Jalen Lloyd, for some reason, something tells me he's going to get a fair share of targets this game. There's going to be a lot of attention on Banks and Nayor with how physically they match up with the Colorado defensive backs. That's not a shot at the Colorado defensive backs by any means. It's just you got a 6'3" and a 6'4" receiver out there that are going to command some respect from Colorado with how they game plan. I wonder if that opens things up for Jalen Lloyd. And for his one target last week, I believe it was one target last week, that felt suspiciously low for me. So I wonder if they have some tricks up their sleeve for Jalen Lloyd.
Can I ask a question about the tight ends? Because I agree. I think when you have the kind of tight ends that Nebraska has with Fedoni and Nelson, do you think that this past Saturday was just, hey, let's put something on tape with these two guys? Because there's no way that you use Fedoni and Nelson horizontally, like side to side. There's no way. I mean, I think the middle of the field will be open for the tight ends. I found that to be curious if they just threw that on tape, because I want Fedoni going north-south. I don't want him going east-west.
And I agree 100%. I wonder if Nelson has a bigger role there. I think, and I said this on our post-game show on Saturday, and I still think it to be true. I think it's something to put on film, but I think it's going to be some part of a staple part of this offense to get guys out to the flat and get pass catches, kind of like a screen, because of what it makes a defensive back have to think about on the field. Or if you see that tight end leaking out into the flat, what are you thinking? I'm flowing downhill, and now there's Jalen Lloyd running over the top, or Naor running over the top. I think it's, you specifically wanted to get it on film last week, but I think it's going to be a staple part of the Nebraska offense that we can consistently rely upon, that it's probably going to be there. I think Nelson probably gets more of those targets this week, just because of how defensive backs have to think, oh, I'm going to come up and take on a block from this wide receiver's running straight at me. I see the tight end leaking out. I have to go make a tackle on a 250-pound guy. And then whenever the defensive backs start biting up on that, starting to play that, now you take the shot over the top where the wide receiver's not running at you to come block you. They're running at you to go 60 yards past you. I think that's part of the reason why we saw so much of that last week, and I think we're going to probably continue to see that.
Give me more flat options or check downs, that quick little fake quick whip pass into the flat, but give me Barney catching the football with his wiggle ability in the flat to make some guys miss. I mean, that's who I want catching the football there. I know he's not a tight end, but you can scheme what you want if you're sat with a similar play call, but a different personnel.
To me, it's Nelson. We're in the same boat. To me, it's Nelson. I think Nelson's the guy that's going to excel in that
role. Bigger body. All right. Guys, let's go around the horn here with a final thought or two. It's the Average Joe Sports Show, the AJ Sports Pod. Find and like and subscribe, YouTube and Twitter and Spotify and iTunes. Prediction time. Is it a happy Memorial Stadium about 10:30? Is it a sad Memorial Stadium? One thing is for certain, it's beyond just compete. They got to win this thing Saturday. I think we're all in agreement there. Will they win it? By what score? Elijah, you want to do the honors first?
As much as it pains me to do it, I'm picking Colorado.
Okay.
I got doubts about Nebraska's ability to handle the moment still. That's been their problem for years and years and years. It's going to take a big switch. Until I see it, that Nebraska's able to handle themselves and be composed in a big-time moment and in a big-time game, I'm going to continue picking against them. It's legitimately a case where my head tells me that Nebraska is the better team on paper. Nebraska should be coming out of this game, but there's a lot of variables to football. That's why it's not played on paper. And the big variable to me is how Nebraska handles a big-time moment where the entire state is behind you and there's all the pressure on it. It's tough for a true freshman quarterback to step into. So for that reason, I'm going to take Colorado. They haven't proven themselves in that regard either. The wheels really fell off for their team last season. But just something about the moment scares me for Nebraska being able to step up and handle that moment. If they do it on Saturday and they prove me wrong, great. You can check that one off the box or check that box off. But that box has not been checked for me. Nebraska's ability to handle a big-time moment. For that reason, I'm going to pick Colorado. No score. It's probably going to be somewhere in that 31-28 range, but no necessary score because people already probably want to murder me.
Husker Nation is not mad. They're disappointed. We're going to give you the father speech. Billy D.
Well, we'd like to thank Elijah for his being here on this final Average Joe Sports Show. I go back in time thinking about all the great games in this historic rivalry in college football. Two of my favorite games in Nebraska football history are that 94 game, and the 94 team is going to be honored. Not that that's going to have any bearing on the game, but I do think that team kind of gave a blueprint for what could happen on Saturday. That Colorado team in 94 had Rashawn Salam and Cordell Stewart and Westbrook and Johnson and the triplets of their own scoring explosion, and they scored 7 points. I think Colorado, I think you're right, though, Elijah, that they will have a couple of plays where they bust one for 50, 60, 70 yards, but they're just not going to have a ground game against that Nebraska defense. They're not going to change their dimensions. And I think eventually If they just continue to throw the ball, he's not going to have the kind of the time and pocket that he had against North Dakota State. These are just different athletes that Nebraska has, and they can come at so many different angles. And so I think Nebraska's defensive line will be making an incredibly uncomfortable game for Colorado. So 24-7. Or my other favorite game is the 92 Halloween night game when it was 52-7. And I don't remember who it was that tackled Coy Detmer, but it made him look like a 7-year-old kid taking off his pajamas, whereas his shirt was over his helmet and he was kind of walking around.
Wasn't that Travis Hill?
Might have been Travis Hill right early in the game, set the tone. So somewhere between 52-7, something like that. But I think Nebraska's defense is going to be pretty dominant on Saturday.
Trevin Travis ate well that night.
Oh, they killed they killed Cordell Stewart for 3 years.
Yeah, killed Cordell. Coy came in as a true freshman. The story of the only guy in Colorado football who knew that they were switching offenses from the eye bone to the 1-back, 3-wide set was Bill McCartney. Yep. He failed to tell his assistants that when a man named Tommy Frazier was on his recruiting trip. They took Coy Detmer over Tommy Frazier. Colorado did.
That worked out for him.
4 years of hell. So, Sharpie, you going to give a score or just a lead?
No, I will give you a score. So there's a lot of what Elijah and Bill just said. I think Nebraska, they opened up the kimono when Bayor and Gifford spoke the other day. And they're both defensive guys. I think this team has looked at this game and they've looked at the way that this can move the season forward. And they have been an incredibly confident team for a while in what they're doing. And I think you saw that on Saturday against UTEP. They had a good camp. They were ready to play. They knew what they were doing. They were in the right position. And especially that side of the ball, when I look at this matchup on Saturday and what needs to happen for Nebraska to win, the fact that Nebraska is really good defensively gives me hope and gives me that this is the time that Nebraska starts winning these kind of games. And I think Nebraska wins. I think it's a one-score contest for a while. I think it's in the range of 27-21. And then I think Nebraska gets a late score. Nebraska covers, and they win 34-21.
Okay. I'm along the same lines with that math. Nebraska needs to break 30. And Colorado can't get much more over 20. Because it's going to be a style that does matter. And Nebraska is going to need to hold the football, run the football, and your best offense is a great defense, yes, but also keeping that explosive offense on the sideline watching, out of rhythm, physically with your play, but also the fact that they're not on the field. So give me Nebraska 37. And I think Colorado taps out at 21. And I think it's a couple of fourth quarter takeaways by the black shirts that make all those slinkies at the bar taste great.
And we'll be there.
Yes, we will. Well, that'll wrap us up. Average Joe Sports Show coming at you live Sunday reaction pod. As we'll be ready to rock and roll 10:30. Is that all right, fellas?
10:30.
Yeah. Yep.
Sure.
10:30 Central.
I already canceled my tea time.
Okay. We'll get that tea time picked up later in the day, my friend. 10:30 it is for the next Average Joe Sports Show. Like and subscribe on YouTube and Twitter at the AJ Sports Pod. And review us, like and subscribe on iTunes and Spotify. Bill Doleman, Gary Sharp, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Talk to you Sunday morning, 10:30, with the next Average Joe Sports Show.